Evening is Cheryl Costa. And Cheryl Costa is a two-service military veteran, a retired aerospace security engineer, and a published playwright. She has had a lifelong interest in UFOs from 1998 to 2001. She hosted the X Factor talk radio program in Washington, D.C., covering UFOs and many other paranormal topics. In 2013, she began writing New York Skies, a weekly newspaper blog for SyracuseNewYorkTimes.com. And in the column, she shares lively accounts of New York State UFO sightings. Cheryl's live presentations are known for their frankness, humor, and a bit of their theatrical flair, which I love. Her website is www.syracusenewstimes.com/author/Cheryl-Costa. And also, Cheryl Costa was raised Roman Catholic, became a witch in 1978. She's initiated in the Alexsanderian tradition and cross-initiated in a handful of small eclectic traditions. She taught basic craft to several hundred students over the years. From 1991 to 1992, she produced the first publicly televised cable television program by witches about witches. The program was called Kestrel and Company and was on cable systems in Washington, D.C. area for several years. In 2014, as a part of a Bachelor of Arts degree program thesis project, she wrote and produced an academic documentary about the witch history of Kestrel and Company show titled When Witchcraft Came Out of the Broom Closet. I love that title. Cheryl is also an ordained Tibetan Orthodox Buddhist nun and currently serves as an ordained Nakama yogi. And I believe I said that right this time. Let's hope so. Please welcome Cheryl to the show this evening. Good evening, Cheryl.
Hello, Solaris. How are you?
I'm doing great, and hopefully I pronounced that right. I know one time I didn't. Is it Nakma?
You mean the Nakmo?
There it is. Okay. I knew I was going to get it right. Thank you.
It's not a problem.
At some point in the continuing. So tell me what's been happening. I know you have a new book. I'm so excited.
Yes, the book is called The UFO Sighting Desk Reference, United States 2001 to 2015. It's a 15-year study.
Nice. I love it. And how can everybody purchase this? It's live right now, right?
Well, no, probably about a week, maybe two at the most. It's going to be up on Amazon. We're doing the last proof. We thought it'd be up last week, but there were some layout problems that we had to deal with, and when we got an actual copy of the book, we said, "Oh my, that's not going to work." Certain things weren't going to work, and it looked good on the computer screen. It didn't look good in print, so we've had to make some adjustments. But it's almost ready. It will be out by the end of the month.
How awesome! Yeah, that's exciting. I guess you can't pre-order it then, or can you?
No, as soon as it comes up live on Amazon, then the pre-order will be available, and then the way Amazon works, they put it up on pre-order for like anywhere from a week to a month, and then they see how many pre-orders they get, and that's kind of gives them a clue how many to have in back stock.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how they're doing it. Now, we're not doing it as a Kindle book. It's as a printed book. It's almost 380 pages.
Nice.
It's a lethal weapon in size. It's really quite a thick. Well, it's a reference book. If you go to the library and look at reference books, most of them are pretty thick. And that's what this one is. And it's got a lot of cool information. It doesn't have sightings per se. But what we've done is we've taken both the National UFO Reporting Center and MUFON's databases from 2001 to 2015, and we basically sanitized them, cleaned them up, and put them together, and we added some additional information, and we've got over 120,000 sighting records that we are counting. So we've done a United States summary, which is interesting. And the book covers what we call frequency, distribution, and shapes. Basically, how many, where they were, and what shapes they were.
Very good.
Okay. And
nice.
the beauty of the where they were is normally if you'd go into either of the databases, all you would have is state and city. Okay. Mm-hmm. And what we've done is we went in when we were organizing the database, once we got them crunched and put together, we added, and this was time-consuming, we added county data.
Nice.
So United States has well over 3,000 counties, and we basically can report And we do in the book every state and every county in every state for the entire United States.
Oh, that's awesome. That takes a lot of time. And yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead. Well, for that 15-year window. And that's going to be the power of this for anybody who wants to do research and everything. As one of the people who wrote a foreword for the book said, this is going to be the key for people to be able to go back into the database and actually do the research of maybe specific sightings, because we tell you what to look for.
It's perfect. I can't wait to get my hands on this book, I have to tell you. You know why? Because I'm very analytical, and the way you have this formula, it seems to me like it's very practical and analytical, the way you have it aligned. I really like that. Yeah. So one of its kind.
What's it's done is we've got histogram charts showing the sightings from 2001 through 2015. It'll show you what the totals for a year are. Okay. And then this is like on the first page of any particular state, and it will tell you what the top 10 counties for that state are. And it will tell you what the top 10 shapes are for that state.
Very nice. I like that. Very good. So can you give us a little bit of a teaser insofar as, for example, the shapes? What's the most common shape that you've noticed? Or is it go from state to state then?
Well, it does vary from state to state, but overall, okay, now here's one thing you have to realize. When people look at the, I have a little bit of a head cold, so pardon me if I sniff a little bit here. I've had people ask me, how come I didn't go all the way back? And part of the reason was when we were doing some studies here just for New York State, because I write a weekly column, and we noticed that the real good amounts of sightings didn't start really getting tabulated or reported until the 80s. Before that, sightings got reported by, clippings sent into somebody who was collecting his stuff, like MUFON, or the original version of what would be the National UFO Reporting Center. People sent clippings in, faxes in, voicemail messages onto onto an answering machine, and that's about what was out there. Okay. And then when we got into the late 80s, we started having connectivity with the early American Online, CompuServe, that sort of thing. And suddenly people had a place where they could report these things. As we got into the 90s, there was these like bulletin board systems that tiered up into the Internet by the mid-90s. And what happened is by the mid-90s to the early, coming up to about early 99, 2000 timeframe, people started getting pretty good access through broadband, and the National Reporting Services had web interfaces. And at that point, what I'm going to call the sighting levels began stabilizing a lot, enough where we could actually gather some reasonably good data. Now, on first glance at one of these charts, it looks like they've been screaming upward since the 80s up till the early 90s. And that's partly true, but it's also an artifact of reporting. It's going up because people have more access to report.
Right.
Okay, that's what an artifact of reporting is. And you can see several jumps as different technologies came into play. Okay, and this is something that has to be remembered by people when they glance at the chart and say, wow, look at the UFOs took off in 2007. Well, no, there was a very big increase in broadband at that point.
Right.
Okay?
Makes sense.
And then there was another jump in 2008 because MUFON had a national television program done about it. I think it was in like a Discovery Channel or something like that, did a television program about MUFON. And in 2008, on almost every state chart, you see a spike in 2008, a big one. Okay, and then you see another big spike in 2012 when everybody was worried about the Mayan calendar ending and all that kind of stuff. So These are artifacts of reporting. But if you just look at the chart in general, you see a general trend upwards.
Wonderful. I like that. So you have the nice graphs right in there in the book. itself.
We have graphs in here. On the typical state, we have the first page. We have a graph of just the years and the volume per year, and then also what we have in there is amazingly enough. I wasn't going to put it in, but we put the we had the ability to do the once we got the data crunched, we had the ability to do the graphs a number of ways, and one of the things we put in was a graph at the end of each of the states of the sightings by month. Now, a lot of people say, well, why would you bother doing that? Well, we did just because we could. And
nice.
There's something cool about this. I really wasn't paying attention to it. I just did it because I thought it'd be cool to have that information. And there's a bar chart, January, February, March, April. And Linda, my spouse and my editor, she was going through it when she was putting things together, and she says, wait a minute, have you noticed the pattern here? I said, what are you talking about? She says, well, there's like a seasonal pattern change. I said, well, yeah, it goes something like the winter months, January, February, March, April, they're usually pretty flat, just a small amount of sightings. And then you get out towards May, it starts humping up. And in June, July, August, slumping back down towards September, October. There's this hump in the middle of the year, nice weather, And she said, yeah, well, that's nice in the upper northern states, but that doesn't apply in the middle states or the southern states. I said, what? So I went back in and we started looking at it. I ended up writing a paper in the book about it. There's a seasonal pattern. If you're up in the northern states, you have this hump in the middle for the summer months. As you start moving down to the middle latitudes, like Virginia, West Virginia, states that run all the way parallel across the country, they start those seasonal monthly variations start flattening out a bit. And when you get into the deep south, like the deep southwestern states, Florida and Texas, things like that, the numbers flatten out. It still looks like a picket fence to a certain degree, but it's flat. And one thing that's consistent is February is the worst month every place. It's only about 5% nationally.
Wow, it's interesting.
Any particular year. So you wanted to know about shapes.
Yeah.
Well, here's the high-level shapes. Okay, the overall, I saw a light. Okay, that's about 12.8%. That's the largest overall one in the United States. Now, this varies from state to state, but that's generally one of the higher ones. It's always in the top 10. A circle, that's about 11%. A sphere is about 10%. Now, there's a category called unknown, and it was kind of a catch-all, and that runs about 9%, 9.5%. Triangles get in there at about 9%. Fireballs at about 7%. There's a category called other. Now, remember, we try to preserve the integrity of the reporting of the shapes, both by MUFON and by Newfork. They call them different things, but they're roughly the same. But we left them in their original naming. We thought about just combining the ones that were supposed to be similar. Like the one where it's really obvious is Newfork calls it a disc with a D-I-S-K, and MUFON calls it a disc with a D-I-S-C. And we left them separate.
Okay.
And but that's to protect the integrity of what was being reported.
Right.
Starlight-like things about 4.5%. Ovals about 4.5%. Discs around 277, something like that. So that gets you an idea of, and I do it by percentages because we've got both the actual counts and we have the numbers. The national number for the United States for 2001 to 2015. And another thing we wanted to do with this book was we wanted a nice, crisp 21st century snapshot of where UFOs are. If we
Nice.
had tried to go all the way back into the 60s and 70s, now it would have just been all what I'm going to call all that unstable reporting back there up to now, and it really wouldn't have told us anything. We wanted a snapshot. Remember after 9/11 in 2001, the government told us, report what you see.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people did report what they saw. And you can
Interesting.
still get laughed off the phone with any fire department or police department or newspaper you call with this stuff. But we said we're going to measure from 2001 to 2015, a nice crisp 15-year window. And I've already had people ask me, well, why didn't you put 2016? Well, what we did was when we decided to do this in late 2015, we waited till New Year's Day morning in 2016, and we downloaded the databases then. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And by doing that, we captured it. And people say, well, why didn't you add 16 while you were working on it? It took us a year to compile all this stuff.
Wow.
Virtually all but 4 weekends in the past year.
My goodness. Yeah, that's a lot of time and energy.
Yeah, it was. It was literally every 3-day weekend. We had 4-day weekends, whatever. It took all year to do this. And there was, as they say, for the millennials listening, there was not an app for this. This was old school Excel sheet editing.
Oh, wow. That's great. Oh, I can't
Because
wait.
the databases were let us say it this way, messy. We have a category that counts as a county. We had to add the unknown county for every single state, because we found that an average of about it varied between 1 and 4%, depending upon the state. It's an average of about 2% overall. People that didn't fill in the city, town, city field, or they wrote something else in. You wouldn't believe how many people, instead of filling in the town or the city, wrote in something like, I'm afraid to tell you, or I've been asked not to tell you. Something to that effect. And I saw this a lot. Okay. Now, a lot. Okay. Hey, like I said, 2 or 3 or 4 in a couple of thousand. But, this is what we were looking at. And so we decided, instead of filtering that, it's about 3,100 files overall out because it didn't have the geodata. We said, no, we'll leave it there. That's how it was reported. Because usually the sighting was good, the shape was there, so we just didn't know the city. There were times people reported me a mile marker. That I could look up. They reported me a zip code. That I could look up. They gave me a longitude. Rarely they gave me that, but if they did that, I could look it up. But if they just left it blank or filled in some other piece of information, said they were scared to do it or something, I couldn't tell you. And we finally, a friend of mine came to the conclusion of why somebody would say, I'm scared to tell you. Imagine that you are probably one of 10 houses out in some rural town that's not much more than a crossroads, a general store, and a volunteer fire department. And if you reported that little burg, everybody in town would know, oh, it's probably Joe down the road.
Right.
Okay, and we figured that's probably what the deal is. It's such a small community, everybody would know who it is.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense right there. Wow.
So I'm going to give your listeners the big number here. The total sightings for the 15-year window of this report, 2001 to 2015, is 121,036.
Wow.
And
That's not bad.
Both databases. That's a good amount of sightings. And if you use a couple of different people take credit for this, Jocksville and a couple other people, but I learned about this thing from Stanton Friedman, okay? And I call it the Friedman factor in the book. He says 1 in 10 people report what they see. Okay? So if 1 in 10 people report what they see, so 10 times 121,000 is 1.2 million potential sightings out there.
Wow. Yeah.
And 90% of which didn't get reported.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's just a little thing. And I wrote an article about that. The first 6 chapters of the book, I write narrative in there and try to put some analysis to the whole thing.
Right.
So
and you said this was from... Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask real quick. You said this was from the MUFON database?
MUFON and National UFO Reporting Center database.
Okay. Is there any other area you could have acquired the data from, or is those the only 2?
Well, okay, they were the 2 that I was familiar with. They seemed to be the largest.
Mm-hmm.
I've been writing the column for 3 years.
Right.
So for 3 years, I'm in the database every week looking at what people are reporting, especially for New York State, seeing if there's something interesting to write about. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying it has to be a hot sighting. It just might mean, there's this guy in Auburn, and he saw 2 red fireballs go over his house, and he was just thoroughly impressed. He turned around, 3 more went over. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my favorite stories. But it's just down the road 30 miles from where I live here in a little small town called Auburn, New York.
Wow.
We had a guy out here in a place called Herkimer. Okay, he was taking he's out in rural country. He was taking a snowmobile across the fields over to a friend of his farm, about the equivalent of about maybe 100 acres away, and a black triangle went over. It made his snowmobile sputter and quit. And he looked up overhead over clear starlit sky, and there was just this big black silhouette of a triangle.
Oh, wow.
And the humming sound.
Mm-hmm.
And as it got past him, it flew under the big grid power lines,
Mm-hmm.
and electrical charge jumped down to the thing, like lightning bolts off the power grid.
Oh man! Wow.
And that's the kinds of things that people report.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, there's always the person who says, I'll give you one of my own sightings. It was 2013. I worked at a different newspaper. I was coming in at 3:00 in the morning. We had just put the paper to bed. Okay, and I came in at 3:00 in the morning. It was a clear June morning, 3:00 in the morning-ish, and I'm standing there in the driveway, looked up at a starlit sky, and I noticed there's a hole in the stars. And then I look even closer, and there it is, about a football field long, 2 stories deep, leisurely floating northwest.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
All I could do was just sit there and gawk at the thing for 5 minutes.
My goodness. Wow. So you've had quite a few sightings then, huh?
I've seen, okay, I tell people I've had 5 real solid sightings in my life. And there was a time last summer when I was down in Montrose, Pennsylvania. I'm a reenactor.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of these, medieval LARP things. And
I love it.
As they say, I was guarding the tavern from monsters. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting out there with my big rubber sword, and I'm sitting there watching this about 11:30 at night, and I happened to lay my head back, and I'm looking at this starlit sky, and I very quickly ascertained what the flight pattern was for an airport about 30 miles away. It was up and above beyond that I counted probably 14 UFOs in a period of an hour.
Oh, my goodness. Wow.
And this isn't just, maybe it was a satellite. No, satellites don't stop and start darting around,
Mm-hmm. Right.
That kind of thing, So, okay, so the book. We've got sightings by months. We got them by the states. One of the things we did was we also, for every state up in the United States summary portion of this thing, we actually broke down what the totals were for the states by reporting service, MUFON or NUFARC.
Mm-hmm.
And when you go to, it's in the United States summary section in the beginning, and it's also the last chart on every individual state. There's a little box here that says MUFON or NUFORC percentages and the actual numbers for that state. All but 3 states, National UFO Reporting Center is the dominant database by probably a 60-40 ratio, typically, sometimes 70-30, in a couple of cases 80-20, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But there were 3 states where MUFON was dominant: Texas, Michigan, and Indiana.
Mm.
The numbers flipped, and MUFON was the dominant database. So
wow.
I am at your service to tell you whatever statistic you would like to know.
Oh, cool. Oh, excellent. Well, you know what I found really interesting is when you were talking about the 9/11, that it sounded like there was an increase. UFOs were on the rise. Was that because people were looking out for what? Something in the skies pertaining to terrorism, or what?
Well, no. There was a little bit of a boost from that, but actually from 1998 through 2001, it was about the same level, with only about a 5%, maybe 10% increase.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it wasn't that huge. The real jump doesn't come until we get to the real jump upwards. Again, I think this is an artifact of reporting. We don't really start seeing a jog upwards until about 2007.
Okay.
Let me give you an example. National numbers, sighting numbers from 2001 are 3,478. Okay, they're 3,742 in 2002. They're 4,061 in 2013. Again, they're holding 4,300, 4,700, 4,900 all the way through to 2006. And then they jump to about 6,300, and then they jump again in 2008 to 8,700, 9,000, something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
it holds that way solid, about 8,000 to 9,000 for about 3 years, and then it jumps again in 2011 to about 10,000 sightings. Okay.
Mm.
And then it jumps again in 2012 to about 14,000 sightings, and it holds a level between 12 and 14,000 sightings per year from 2012 to 2014. And in 2015, it dropped off a little bit to about 11,000, a little over 11,000 sightings.
Wow, that's really really interesting.
And that's
Did
not
you?
the international numbers. Add about
Okay.
another 2,000 or 3,000 international numbers a year.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I know you mentioned something about the latitudes and longitudes when some of these people were writing their reports, but did you factor in those latitudes and longitudes? Did you create a graph at all?
No.
Okay.
They were so rare.
I
They
see.
were rare.
Okay.
They were
I was,
rare. I think per state, I don't remember more than 2 reports that were, instead of city or town, they reported a latitude and longitude. I actually had more situations. I probably had more situations per state where somebody gave me mile markers on a highway.
yeah, it makes more sense.
And
Yeah.
actually, if you can put those mile markers in for a certain state, usually you can get it into a county.
Yep. Oh yeah, absolutely. And occupants in the craft, I know I probably mentioned this before in another show, but have you thought about, is there any reference to whether it was occupied or not, or if they observed anybody in the craft?
Amazingly enough, I didn't. People are gonna think I'm crazy, but since we're talking over 121,000 sightings,
Mm-hmm.
I didn't actually look at the sighting information in most cases.
Okay.
In fact, after I got probably past the raw data stage that I downloaded and started cleaning up the database, one of the first things I dumped was the explanation field.
Ah, okay. So you just streamlined it.
I kept it down to what, when, and where.
That makes sense. Yeah.
That's all
And
I
then
kept.
of course,
That's all I kept.
right. And then of course, anybody who purchases this book, it's such a good resource for them to keep exploring and doing their own work.
Well, what it helps, I've already had a couple of people were playing around with some of the individual charts I shared with a couple of investigators,
Mm-hmm.
And they were able to literally put a map on the wall and start putting pins in that map. And because I got county data, here's the beauty of the county data. I know there are going to be some listeners who are going to say, "Well, why did you bother with county data?" Well, like I said earlier, a lot of places out in the rural areas are sometimes. I used to live out in a rural area, and we had a trailer park with about 70 trailers. We had a crossroads. We had a general store that sold Haagen-Dazs and a volunteer fire department. Okay? And that's it. And there was some of these places all over the rural area in upstate New York were not much more than cattle crossings. Okay?
Wow.
But they had a town they had a town name or something like that. So if you look at the big major population centers, okay, you can say Albany, New York. Well, I'll use New York State as a reference. Albany, New York, yeah, that's a major population center. But if I give you a place called Weltonville, and there's been 2 sightings there, you wouldn't think much of it. But if you look at that, you look at Tioga County, where Weltonville is, and you've got different sightings in these little cattle crossing type rural villages all over Tioga County, suddenly you start seeing, hey, how come there's a cluster of 25 UFO sightings over a period of 5 years in Tioga County in this one particular area? That's what putting this county data in gives you, is you start seeing clusters.
Right. Yeah, I like that. That's really makes it a lot easier when you're doing research.
Yeah, and one of the mistakes a lot of people make too, when in fact we had to write a small chapter on this, very small chapter, said how to use this book. The key thing is just don't look at the places where all these big sightings are. You look into any major population base, you're going to see a lot of sightings listed. Okay. Yeah, there's a lot of activity, but there's this argument. Is it the chicken or egg situation here? Are there a lot of sightings because there are lots of people? Or are there a lot of sightings because are there a lot of people and they are seeing a lot of sightings?
Right.
Are the UFOs watching the people or the people watching the UFOs? It's one or the other, or both.
Right. Yeah. Is there a Well, go ahead. I was going to ask you. I'll ask you in a second here.
Well, let me finish the thought. The thought, real quick, is this: my spouse Linda, she made the same a similar observation. He says the real beauty here is not so much where they are; it's where they're not.
Right.
In some cases, we found some really far out places where they aren't. And people say, well, maybe they got no population there. No, I've found of at least 2 places in New York State, 2 counties that have actually the same size populations, but they have radically different numbers for sightings.
Well, that's interesting.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you had a question. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. I was going to ask you about, is there a category for the space anomalies associated with perhaps meteor showers?
No.
Okay. I was just curious.
No, there was never a category for that in either of the, unless you count the one that was called star-like, that kind of thing.
Or maybe unknown, or I don't know if unknown would even qualify.
It's whatever the person reported.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Now remember, the average person isn't a trained observer. Okay. You wouldn't believe how many of these reports I've seen over the last 3 years where somebody didn't give you much information about the sighting other than the fact that it scared the heck out of them, or they were, in awe and amazement and called their grandmother and called their mother-in-law, and, they sit there and tell you all this, but they tell you very little about the actual sighting. So that's one of the flaws with all the reporting. People keep thinking these databases are full of huge amounts of scientific data, and they aren't. Okay, so that's why we went with the idea of how many, when, and where.
Yeah, I think it's pretty practical and grounded, actually, for a lot of different reasons. Are there photographs in this, or no?
No.
Okay.
The only graphic, it's bad enough. Part of the reason we did our book, we printed out a run when we first got done with all of the charts and got them all organized. And we went to a local print shop and said, dump the thing. And it took like a ream of paper. It was huge.
Wow.
And well, it was one. We did one page, not double-sided, that kind of thing. And then we cleaned it up. And then we uploaded our stuff to Create Space, and then we got ourselves a proof of the book. And like I was telling you off air, some things look really good when they're on the computer screen, and they look really bad when they're on paper.
Mm-hmm.
And we had a lot of that to clean up. We had to go back. We had about 30 or 40 glitches in a 380-page book isn't too bad. But
not at all.
It did take most of this weekend to clean it up. Okay.
Wow.
But we're getting ready to put up what we think is our final proof tomorrow. And now that we know how to bring down the PDF, there was also some problems when you upload a Word file to Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
There's a problem with they convert it to a PDF, and I don't know if you know much about PDFs, but sometimes PDFs don't convert everything perfectly.
Right. Yeah.
And we ran into a little bit of that. We had one where we had a map. There's a couple of maps in there. We used for consistency. We used on the national charts. Or the national maps, we used census maps.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and we went by census regions and census districts because it was the only thing that was consistent from state to state.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And when we put arrows from little boxes pointing at the different states, everything was fine except one of the Midwest maps. For some reason, instead of pointing from the box with the number in at the state, some reason the PDF generator turn the arrows around so that the arrows were coming out of the state pointing at the box. It was weird,
Mm-hmm.
But these are little printing glitches you run into. I have to give a great deal of credit to my spouse, Linda Miller Costa. She has a publishing background from being in the scientific community, so she knows how to lay out books, scientific books like this.
Well, that comes in handy. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I couldn't have done it without her. I really couldn't have, because she brought insight to. She'd look at what I did and says it'd be nice if you had this too.
Oh, good.
And again, another reason we did this as a reference book is that there's not enough scientific information. In fact, I showed copies of some of the early pieces of this thing to Stanton Friedman, and he held up a piece of paper that I had shown him, and he says, somebody is finally publishing the data.
Mm-hmm.
This is terrific, and he
Yeah.
was really excited about this because most people go into these long, big narrative books. This is a charts and graphs book. It looks like the Census Department did it.
Yeah. I can imagine. I can't wait. I'm really excited to purchase a copy. There's no doubt.
And it's a reference book. It's going to be right there in the reference section of the library, right there with Jane's fighting ships.
It's going to be awesome. Yeah,
so
yeah.
We're trying to elevate UFOlogy to a point where now we've got reference data that you can go into the library and look up. And if the book does okay, we hope to do this every 3 years and do a revision every 3 years with an additional 3 years worth of data.
Mm-hmm. I think it's going to take off. I mean, I just see it as taking off. There's no doubt about that. I'm surprised. You're right, though. Why didn't anybody else think of this?
We don't
After
know.
all these years. It's been years and years. Yeah. So I'm really glad you did this. It's very unique.
Well, okay. I'm going to be a little critical. Can I be
Sure.
critical for a minute?
Go ahead.
There's a lot of people who are just what I'm going to call fascinated with the. I had a guy at the MUFON convention last summer after I did a presentation of the material as we had it as of last summer. And he said, well, why didn't you put the sightings in there? I said, it would have been a 700-page book if we'd kept the sightings column.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I mean, it would have been the size of your family Bible.
Right.
And we couldn't do that. That information is already out there in the databases. We just tried to compile the what, when, and where to help give somebody who's a researcher an idea what any particular state had right down to the county level. And once you get that, we've got it broken up into, like, say you look at it, sightings per county. It goes counties down one side, and the years across the top. So if you're interested in what was going on in a particular county at a particular year, you can look it up. It's all summarized and tabulated right there for you.
Yeah, it makes it very, very easy. Yeah, I love it. I can't wait for it to come out. So are you going to do any public speaking anytime soon to promote your book?
If I get invited, yeah.
Well, you should. You should be.
I did speak at the MUFON convention in Orlando last summer, and we did the study that we did that became the book is what's called the National Magnitude Study, and I reported on that. The numbers weren't quite finalized at that time. We knew it was going to be over 100,000 sightings, but we weren't 100% sure how it was going to finally settle out. And I really didn't have a good number until this past October. Because we were still cleaning up some glitches in the database and a few things like that. So pick a. Oh, you know what I did this past week? I don't know. You probably saw it on Facebook. I started putting up these little teaser banners, the colored ones that said such and such county and such state had this many UFO sightings between 2001 and 2015, and then I referenced the book. Right?
Love it.
And then I did this every morning for the week. And then one morning I said, if you're interested in your particular county, tell me your county and state, and I'll tell you the numbers. And the response was tremendous.
Excellent.
I had over 100 responses across about 10 different groups on Facebook, and people would give me their county and their state, and I would look it up. Sometimes they'd give me 2 counties in their state, and I'd look it up for them, and I'd give them a county rank. And that's something we did, but we didn't publish. In the book, we published a top 99 counties of over 3,000 U.S. counties.
Wow.
Okay, that's in the United States summary. We only did the top 99 counties. But in a separate spreadsheet that I had going, I have all, it's upwards of 3,070 counties or something like that. I have every single county in the United States ranked by sightings. And I can tell
That's
you
incredible.
What the count ranked. And
That's
I
excellent.
asked me, what about my county? I said, well, it had almost nothing, so it was like 2550 or something like that, you know. But we've got that data. That's the beauty. And one of the things we're going to we tell people, we didn't write a traditional introduction to the book. We wrote an FAQ, which makes it a little bit more readable because it's broken up into smaller subject matters. Because most people don't even look at they see the introduction and they blow right past it, you know. We did the FAQ to answer questions and categories. Like the cover of our book is a little on the boring side. It's not even color. It's black and white. It's got a hand-drawn UFO that was done by a local artist for us. She did it like a pen and ink etching. Okay, it was one of these UFOs that has the rows of windows around it was a flying saucer and one that had the row of windows around the middle.
Oh, nice, yeah.
And she did it. Well, because the idea behind this is, one, the cover of the book was laid out like a government report.
You're hired.
That was Linda's little insidiousness. She wanted this thing to look like an official report.
Yeah.
Okay? And it is a scientific report. We both got degrees in science. So we did that. And then we did this one little piece of artwork. Now somebody said, well, that's a little boring. I said, well, wait a minute. These are sightings. These are retro sightings. People individually report these things, and sometimes they give you hand-drawn pictures.
Yep.
I've seen this many times in MUFON reports. There'll be a pencil and ink or a crayon drawing of what they saw. So we made something reminiscent of that on the front cover.
I think that's great.
Yeah, it's fun. And like I said, when it came back with the slick cover they have on it, it actually looks like a textbook you might buy in a college bookstore.
Well, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome.
What
about? I was going to ask you about states.
Go ahead with your question. Yeah. Any particular state you're interested in?
Well, what are the most active states? You've probably heard this a billion times, but which ones are really standing out as being very, very active?
Let me give you the top 10.
Okay.
Okay. California is number one, and this is the weird part. They in the 15-year window, they had 15,836 sightings.
Hmm.
The next two states are literally half of that. Okay. Florida, 7,787. Texas, 7,058. And then from there on, Washington, Pennsylvania, New York, Arizona, Illinois, Michigan, Ohio, all sit in the 5,000 to 4,000 sightings range.
That's interesting.
So all the rest of those states in the top 10 are a third of what California had.
Do you think it has anything to do with military bases at all, or?
Well, that's what everybody jumps on that.
I know.
Everybody says, "Oh, Lockheed Skunk Works is out there and everything." Well, let's take one more kick at that. California's counties rank in, I think it was something like 7 or 8 of California's counties rank in the top 99 counties for the United States.
Oh, wow.
And L.A. County by itself had 3,213 sightings in 15 years. That's more than 40 states have.
Holy cow.
One county. Now, a lot of people say, "Oh, yeah, there's Lockheed and there's this and there's that." No. Here's something most people don't know about L.A. They were reporting formation reportings of UFOs before we had manned flight.
Mm-hmm.
They were reporting squadrons of UFOs in the 1880s.
Wow. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah. So people say, I mean, they've had tons of activity in California before we had manned flight.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something we have to look at before you just start saying it. I've had a lot of people just knee-jerk and say, "Oh, that's easy. That's because of all the military testing out there." Well, not necessarily.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else going on there, but nobody wants to talk about it. And you wouldn't believe the amount of silence I'm getting from the press.
Really?
I reached out to close to 50 major television stations in the top 10 states, in their top markets, in their top 10 states. I've reached out to close to 45, if not, let's say 45 newspapers in those same cities, and I only had one bite.
Really?
And and it wasn't just because you'd get an editor on the phone. I'm really good at pitching this. I'm in the media business myself,
Mm-hmm.
and I tell them I've got this really, really great reference book. I can tell you exactly what the county counts of UFOs have been in the last 15 years in your state. Or do you know you guys are in the top 10 states or the top 5 counties in the United States? And you could hear the tone change when they heard the word UFO. You could hear the tone change in their voice. I got laughed off the phone by 2 or 3 editors. The phone slammed in my ear by 2 or 3 editors.
Wow.
It's been insidious. Now, Steve Bassett from PRG, Paradigm Research Group, he's our Washington, D.C. lobbyist. He told me, he said, it's this issue of ridicule. The reporters are afraid to put their name on a story about UFOs because they're afraid of ridicule.
Wow. That's too bad. It really, really is. You look at all the television shows out there in mainstream, though, they're about UFOs and everything else. When you give them real data, they can't handle it.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
You're right. Now, I did get one newspaper in Seattle, Washington. Their editor took an interest. He got one of his stringer reporters to talk to me. We talked for about 45 minutes to an hour. I sent him charts and graphs, PDFs of charts and graphs for Washington. And they came back and said, "We're going to publish a really nice story." They're sitting on it until the book is actually live on Amazon and available to get from Amazon. But that's one. I did have one TV station in Long Island, which is a hot spot in New York State, but the problem was they wanted a witness. I said, I'm a number cruncher. I don't know anybody in Long Island. I can't give you a witness. And I went 9 rounds with the guy. Finally, I told him, I said, look, you want somebody local you can stand up and make fun of, don't you? And he slammed the phone down in my ear. So that's
good
as
for
far
you.
as that went. But that's what this is. So we're marketing this thing differently. We've given up on the mainstream press. What we've done, I've got 2 British papers want to interview me in the next couple of weeks, which is interesting. And we're going to be primarily marketing through Amazon and marketing through Facebook, through social media.
Excellent. And Cheryl, we're going to head for a break. Everybody, you're listening to Ravenstar's Witching Hour here at freedomslips.com, Studio A. My wonderful guest tonight, Cheryl Costa. We're touching base on her new book, UFO Sighting Desk Reference 2001 to 2015. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.